All right, so we got Oscar Christensen on the top. Esper Blink, 10-1-1. A little draw there as well. And then Ian on the bottom, 10-2. Great records here. Both players in fantastic shape for top 8.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw them both on camera yesterday do some good work. Oscar, I would think, is kind of favored in this style matchup. You know, you're playing against an aggressive deck where most of the time the Scion of Dracos are just like really, really hard to deal with. Not really the case from Oscar's deck. Being able to solitude and deal with that tricky permanent, as well as if you ever run into problems where, you know, the number one problem is there's a ley line on the battlefield and you have Scion of Draco. That's not game like it is in a lot of matchup. Oscar has Witch Enchanters, has Flicker Wisps to blink out the ley line. Even if it's momentarily, you know, that opens the window to deal with the Scion of Draco. So my guess would be Oscar has a pretty good matchup here.
All right, well, no ley line here. Fortunately for our Domain Zoo players, once again.
Right there. It's the white card.
All right. Corey. Let's pull it together here.
Okay.
Turn 1 swap, turn 1 Thoughtseize, looking at a couple lands here, as well as a Flage, a Leyline Binding, a Fable the Mirror Breaker, and a Tribal Flames, the classic card.
Oh, baby.
Fable's going bye-bye, and we see not a lot of aggression here from Ian's hand. Is Ian the beatdown here?
I would think so. Yep, absolutely. Anybody that is playing Ketramos is looking to see turn 7 very often. And, Ian's hand's still very solid. That Fable kind of tied the room together. But cards like Tribal Flame, well, they are pretty awesome. 2 mana, 5 damage is above rate for most burn spells. Not amazing here. And wouldn't be too shocked if we see that kind of burn spells get sided out. But like Leyline Binding, to be able to have an answer for Ketramos, that's what I'm looking for from this deck.
All right, so land pass from Oscar. We see a Triumph in play, and now a fetch for Ian. And trying to get that domain together. All those land types. Of course, 1 Triumph and 1 dual land will get you there.
And usually a couple of combinations that you can do that. You usually play 2 Triumphs and then some form of duels, but not in this list. Just the Datha Triumph, and then you pair it with Steam Vents, and that's how you get domain on turn 2.
All right, well, Ian saying domain isn't that important right now. I want the Sacred Foundry. Going to fetch Shock. We'll see what Ian's got in store. So no full domain just yet. Little shuffle action. And looking like we see a Ragavan here. So we got a Dash Ragavan coming in.
A solid draw there. We'll see Oscar has a plethora of cards that can answer this. No Bowmasters. I think that's kind of the card that has looked really good to me so far. Or maybe it's just because, Corey Burkhart just keeps winning with it, at least when we've been seeing it. But still plenty of answers. Fatal Push amongst the most common one.
So we're going to see a fetch and a surveil. Maybe looking at that top card. Maybe Oscar taking a hit here and trying to mitigate the damage.
Or surveilling first to see if it's worth killing this Ragavan. I would assume even just the mana advantage you'd want to deal with it, but not always the case. And if you're not going to kill Ragavan, you got to get that Thoughtseize out of there. That is for sure.
Yeah, that is a very powerful sequence. So we see a Fatal Push on Ragavan. Ragavan goes down, back Oscar's way. And threat-wise, Ian, that was threat off the top. Still some more work to do in that regard.
Yep.
Flood Strand pass for Oscar, back Ian's way.
This would be a fantastic turn for Fable, but that Thoughtseize took care of the one. Unless Ian were to draw another one, it's going to be an incredible card in this matchup.
Thundering Falls comes down. Sends a land to the bin. Little surveil action. And any more threats on Ian's side. Wants to get on the board. Wants to get things going here.
We know we have Leyline Binding, Flage, and the Tribal Flames. None of those are great right now. If we had untapped land number 3, getting a Flage down, that's going to be great. We've seen matchups where Ian played yesterday where Flage, that was the main thing. Flage, Arena of Glory, not really going to be the case here from Oscar. It's still, of course, a phenomenal card, but it's not the number one thing you want here.
All right, well, Ian doesn't have too much going on. Going to pass back to Backstreet's back. Oscar going to do a little end step surveilling, and Oscar has to love the texture of this game so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that you're not getting really, really hyperly pressured, if you give yourself a ton of time to draw some things, that's what it's all about. If Oscar can ever get to that spot where, let's say, he's about to hard cast an Overlord or is able to go Impending Overlord and then Flicker Wisp, that's the kind of thing that Oscar's looking for in this matchup, and kind of every matchup.
So we got a missed sideboard here, right? These relics can't be in the main, right?
Not a chance. Yeah, we're going to have to go stop this match. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's going on with this relic?
So relic is just a good card in the metagame. It's already awesome at dealing with your opponent's graveyard. But when you have a Ketramos in play, it is tap, exile, your opponent exiles a card, you draw a card, and you lose a life. So it has a lot of utility. And how bad can a card be if you just pay 2 mana, cycle it out, get rid of your opponent's graveyard?
Sounds good. All right, so foothills for Ian. Ian really looking to get on the board here. Pretty hard to remove the relic as well.
Yeah, and Flage is kind of taken away as far as it goes for, being a relevant card whatsoever, especially when Oscar's already Thoughtseize and saw that. He's not going to pop this aggressively to try to find something, for instance.
And also got Bolt added to hand as well here. So a lot of reactive cards from Ian, which is not really what he's looking for.
No, not at all. The Leyline Binding sure is going to be excellent against, Ketramos. Like, this is by far the best Ketramos deck, and Ketramos is a heck of a card. So being able to utilize that to its full potential in Modern here is phenomenal.
However, Oscar's deck is one of the few decks that can really remove a Leyline Binding pretty easily, right?
Yeah, it really can. Yep, you can remove that. Any kind of permanent where normally your color pie can't deal with it. This black-white deck, I think, can pretty much deal with any type of permanent. Prismatic Endings, Witch Enchanters for artifacts and enchantments, just Flicker Wisps to blink things out, as well as Fila to do the same.
All right, so more draw go here. End step fetch. Gonna Surveil. And looking like Ian has finally found a card worth keeping. So end step relic, goodbye land. Or I guess that was in Oscar's end step relic. Sure. Why timing on that?
Yeah, that is kind of strange to me. I don't know if they're maybe just F6 equity.
Oh no, it makes sense because the Ian chooses.
Yeah.
So you always want to do it when the graveyard has the least amount of choices.
Sure.
So here's,
I like F6 equity more than that.
That is also reasonable too. So here's Flage coming down.
Okay.
And can do a little lightning bolt action, a little gain 3 life. And it is going to the graveyard where it is now vulnerable to the relic.
Yep. And we'll see Oscar will kind of play this game where you exile a card, and if Ian's getting close to escaping it, then we can pop the relic. But no need to rush to that right now. Just kidding. We should rush to that immediately.
As soon as possible.
As I was saying, do it right now. That is the way to do it.
So Oscar, that's a statement about Oscar's hand, right? Saying that I want this card. I want to get something going here too.
I want a card, and I already got my value of eating one of these Flages. There's multiple in the list, but yeah, makes a lot of sense. Oscar is definitely looking to find maybe an Overlord here as soon as possible.
So a very slowly played game on both sides. Both players have not done very much, which is kind of weird because both of these decks are definitely on the board decks.
Yes, they absolutely are. And I think this game, the texture of it changes so much if it wasn't for that turn 1 Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize to take the Fable. There's only 2 Fables in Ian's list, but that kind of mid-rangey card, it's a little brutal against the hyper-aggressive decks like Boros. It's not that good against the combo decks. It's a little too slow, but this mid-range style battle, it's exactly what you want. Ian would have loved to have 4 in the deck for this match specifically.
All right, so Oscar thinking about getting on the board, saying, you know what, think about this for a second.
Yeah, Oscar's just drawn a couple cards with all the permanents that he's played, or, a couple 1-for-1s here and there, so has to have a pretty stocked up hand.
All right, here comes an Overlord. Get a mill 4 for the impending costs. So you see Ketramos, Ophelia, Psychic Frog, and a land. Pretty good spread of cards there.
All the choices.
And one important thing to note here is that Oscar is at 11. Not much has actually happened this game.
Yeah.
A lot of Thoughtseize here, a few fetches there, the Flage going upstairs. So that is life total of it. Is a little vulnerable to things like Tribal Flames.
Effectively 6, because we know about the Tribal Flames, and there's no instant speed counterspell, anything like that to deal with it. So if I'm Oscar, I will do everything in my power to not take 1 damage, because a second Tribal Flames is not that far out of realm of possibilities.
Which is tough because Ketramos likes to take 1 damage.
Yes, yes.
Some definite tension in here. And
I want to attack first, and then I'll take 1 damage.
Yeah, pretty sure we have 7 cards in exile. So Ketramos is a creature, 4/4 menace, lifelink, indestructible. There's a fetch land. Impending goes down. And end step, lightning bolt. Bolt Flames. Boy. That would be 11. This would be a crazy game.
Or another Flage. I mean, there's a lot of outs here to just win this game on the spot. And also, Ian didn't go for the end step leyline binding, maybe respecting Ephemerate here. If I'm Oscar, that lightning bolt just made me like eyebrow raised to the max.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. Imagine a game like this where you feel like Ian hasn't actually done anything.
Yeah.
All right, Tribal Flames going upstairs. That's 5 points of damage. Oscar down to 3. Now, of course, Lifelink is on the menu here as well. There's a binding, but like you're saying, Ephemerate could be a possibility.
So if I'm Ian and I don't have the win right now, I am not binding during my turn because if the worst case is there of Ephemerate, you're wrecked. But if you at least do it... Oh, never mind.
Tribal Flames upstairs.
So the only thing that can happen is Oscar can solitude his own Ketramos to stay alive, but that doesn't feel good.
That's the only thing he could possibly be thinking about, right?
Yeah, and I mean, if it doesn't happen, he's just, how did I get here moment. Right. Okay.
All right, so here's Solitude, the old swordsman creature, and the binding in response, very, very well set up by Ian here.
Yes. That's what we call checkmate. Wow.
That was an awesome game from Ian. A game that looked like Ian was not even playing.
Yeah.
Just not playing any threats, not doing much, and then all of a sudden, a little fast loose life total there.
I guess when you're not doing much, you're racking up some burn spells there, huh?
Yeah, 5 + 5 + 5 + 5. That's all it takes, right?
Yeah, so, I guess.
On Oscar's side, let's look at our sideboards here. We got 2 Clarion Conqueror, 4 Consigned Memory, 2 High Noon, 2 Temporary Lockdown, 2 White Orchid Phantom, and 2 Wrath of Disguise. How's Oscar going to avoid this fiery death that just occurred?
Honestly, I would still expect, even though that looked so good here from Ian Starkebaum, those burn spells I still think are going to be trimmed. So I don't know if I want to overly adjust to what that game was. I think this is a very clear case of, especially now that day 2 it's open deck list, to adjust to what you're going to see in the next game, not to the burn spells. It's not like we have, healing solve or anything in the sideboard anyways. And, to answer your question, I don't love a lot of these cards. Maybe you want some White Orchid Phantoms. You do a basic check. There are 2 of them, but, you can mess up a 5-color deck's mana base pretty well with a White Orchid Phantom and an Ephemerate.
All right, so on Ian's side, if we're saying that burn spells are coming out, what's coming in? We got 2 Clarion Conqueror, 3 Consigned Memory, 2 Deafening Silence, 2 Mystical Dispute, 2 Nihil Spellbomb, 1 Pyroclasm, 1 Wear Tear, 2 Wrath of Disguise. Not a lot of those 5-mana, Planeswalker for the mid-range matchups kind of cards here. So what's Ian to do?
Yeah, there's not a lot of cards that are actually amazing in this matchup. I might still consider the Mystical Disputes. Sure, there's not a lot of blue cards. It hits the Frog on turn 2, but just 3-mana counterspell might be okay. Maybe not as good when you're on the draw as you can't counter a Ketramos, but I guess I like the Wear Tears. They look pretty decent. I guess they're not amazing either. Not a lot of sideboard from either player, to be honest. Not expecting these matchups, I would imagine.
Yeah, and the counterspell is one of the clean ways to answer all this ETB value stuff.
Yeah.
Where if you're trying to, kill a creature that's already ETB, did something, it doesn't feel very good, but countering it is the clean answer. So
maybe you want the consigns for that reason from Ian, as consign on a Solitude or something is decent, but that's just okay as well.
All right, so we'll get shuffled up for game number 2 here, but I want to remind you all, of course, about a big upcoming event, our next Spotlight series. Planetary Rotation, and this is an extremely exciting event. This is an event where we're going to see a big actual rotation in Standard. Planetary, Standard, and otherwise. Standard rotation, week 1 Standard, always an absolute blast, both to play in and to watch. Going to be great. SGCon Orlando, a bunch of other great events there as well. August 29th to the 31st. Hashtag SGG Orlando on social media. StarCityGames.com/SGCon for all your information. We'll see you there.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. Gotta love Florida as well. That's always a fun place to be. It's, towards the end of the summer, won't be as hot. It'll still be pretty hot, but, not too bad. Not too bad.
I will be extremely disappointed if in the winner's interview, Nick Miller's doing the interview, and the person who wins does not say, I'm going to Disney World.
Yes. So. Yeah, that's actually the Secret Lair prize for that one. We send you to Disneyland. Yep, absolutely. That is not true. Please don't call me on that.
And we're fired.
Exactly. We had a good run.
It was a good run. It was a good run.
Not bad.
I'm proud of the work we did. All right, so shuffling up for game number 2 here. We'll see Oscar on the play. And again, I agree with your assessment that this matchup looks pretty good for Oscar. Ian's deck is not extremely fast, barring, the really good ley line draws. And if you give Oscar a little time, in theory, the value should add up.
Yeah, I would agree. We just didn't see Oscar did a great job of picking apart the early start here from Ian, and was really starting to, get to the battlefield, but just didn't do it fast enough. And, you can't really play around. Ian drawing only burn spells. It ended up looking pretty good.
There only are 3 Tribal Flames in the deck, the 4 Lightning Bolts. I guess Flage also being burn spell adjacent is pretty good as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, it's just surprising out of nowhere, It's like a shrapnel blast of old.
Yes.
You never want to go to 10 because they always got 2.
Absolutely. Always afraid. And if you're on the burn side, you're like, yeah, keep, crack that fetch land, take 2, no problem.
Oh, Thoughtseize, huh? Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, so both players draw on their openers. They seem relatively pleased.
Not a lot of pressure down below, and I'm not sure at this point with how many times we've seen Ian on coverage that leyline, is just in the deck. I don't think we've ever seen him draw one. We've definitely never seen one in play as a pregame effect. So, maybe a typo.
When I was walking around earlier, I heard a few players musing about, players said that they had played however many rounds at this point, 12, 13 rounds, and had leyline twice.
Yeah.
So maybe leylines are just not for Indiana.
I guess so, yeah.
Not a place for leylines,
Absolutely. It's a place for basketball, I hear, but not ley lines.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, it is a place for Lucky Man's Paradise, Gemstone Caverns.
Oh, yeah?
And unfortunately, Corey Burkhart last round in our side feature match got Gemstone Caverned, and it was a pretty fast draw. And those luck counters, pretty powerful.
Hey, Corey gets to say, never lucky.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what he said, actually. So. All right, so down 6 for Ian. Looking for that ley line, looking for a better hand. We do see Tribal Flames in the hand, so the burn plan is still online.
And I see a Ragavan and a Scion of Draco, so as long as there's some lands to go, that's perfectly reasonable. Looks like Tribal Flames was sent to the bottom. And did see a Clarion Conqueror as well that was brought in. That makes sense. That's a pretty good one.
And so no pregame effects. Didn't need it last game.
Yeah.
All right, so fetch lands on both sides. Oscar's going to pass. We're going to see Ian crack at Foothills. I imagine Ragavan will be hopping into play here.
Yep, makes sense to me.
Of course, for Ian, these 5-color domain zoo decks have always had this mana-based puzzle where you're trying to assemble all 5 types in the cleanest way possible. Shocklands, Triomes, but you got to have A plus B plus C plus D plus E in the right order. So fetching here is not trivial.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the hardest part of playing the deck.
Yeah.
All
right, so we can see a Steam Vents. Here's Ragavan. End step fetch for Oscar. And we're going to see a removal spell here or a scry.
That is the question. Oscar is, of course, a Pro Tour caliber player. Played on the Pro Tour plenty of times. Had some solid results. And, came all the way wearing that Amsterdam shirt. He is from Denmark. So representing over the seas. And just one of the nicest guys ever.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I absolutely love him. He's a good guy.
Love the play of the game, see the world.
Yep, 100%.
So awesome, myself included, and then other players as well, just going to places you would never normally go because of Magic, and then you're there and you're like, wow, I'm here. This is awesome.
100%.
I'm in Japan. I'm in Hawaii. I'm in wherever I might be. So,
and to look back and just think I have so many good friends that live in Denmark. Just something that I would never think of when I started playing Magic, that it would take me there. I would gain those relationships from people that, live so far away.
Good stuff. So just an archive here from Oscar, a little scry action. Keeps card on top, plays the swamp, says go. I got to imagine the top here and the passive mana means Ragavan is probably not long for this world.
Yeah, probably not. Oh, well, it might be.
Okay.
Oh, man, if Ian didn't play a land or something, thinking that there wasn't just a flash threat, this could have been a huge blunder. I did see a Leyline Binding, so if we see a post-combat land... Lush Protocol. Okay, that would not have helped.
All right, so the very risky removal spell here, the 2/2 flash blocker, which could have gone wrong a number of ways. But does not. Ragavan is down. The dog goes down as well.
And there's the cost, in these domain zoo decks. The lands are not free. There's a lot of them that come into play tapped. Sure, they might surveil, but even you get to add some extra greediness to the mana base, playing a tapped mountain half the time with Arena of Glory, 2 tapped Surveil lands, a tapped Triome, your deck can get off to a slow start very easily.
Makes the 1-drops awkward too, right? Where a lot of times you want your 1-drop to be that one Triome. Because it gets you most of the way there, and now you can fetch shock the rest of the way. So when you have Ragavan, it means turn 2 can be a stumble like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Oscar thinking it through. Deciding how he wants to get on the board best here. Ragavan problem solved, but got to assume there's more problems on the way. There are some pretty big threats in Ian's deck. All right, going to go for an Overlord. Let me see a bit of a pause here. Consign to memory on the Overlord trigger. So not stopping the 5/5 itself in a number of turns or a possible blink, but no immediate trigger.
Yeah. So that's why Consign is like solid against Esper Blink. I figured Ian was going to bring him in, but like it always counters like half of a card unless you can get Solitude. You know, if you can get Solitude and there's not an Ephemerate, then all of a sudden you 2-for-1 your opponent. So, that can be really big game.
So some cool tech sideboarding here for Ian.
Yeah.
We see a fetch, we see a shock. And Oscar's start, I think that the turn 2 Philia must block line says that Oscar's hand is probably not the greatest. So Oscar pretty unhappy here, I would assume, to not get a card off that Overlord.
Or just doesn't have a lot of removal. Must be a lot more proactive, And after the last game where he died to not being proactive enough, of course, results-oriented thinking is not, what players should do or do often, but maybe that's in the back of your mind a little bit. Like, I just need to be more proactive so Ian can't just sit back and then eventually burn me out again.
All right, so you see Clarion Conqueror coming down, this recent Tarkir Dragonstorm Dragon, 3/3 flying for 3. Turns off activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers. So no relics.
No relics.
Sorry, Ketchamos.
No Emperor of Bones for the adaptability.
No, Psychic Frog.
Yeah, and no Psychic Frog. So this card actually looks really, really good here from Ian.
Also hard to Fatal Push. It's possible, obviously, but a little more awkward than usual. So Conqueror comes down. We're seeing a lot of Ian's sideboard here.
Surveil that frog out of there, huh?
Yeah, get this frog out of here. This thing does not work at present. So frog goes away. We're going back Oscar's way. The flying body also pretty good. There's a lot of ground stuff happening for Oscar. The fly over is pretty cool.
Absolutely. Flicker Wisp, kind of the main one that can do a nice block. And speak of the devil.
All right, that is a very powerful turn for Oscar. So Flicker Wisp comes in, going to target the Overlord, going to exile it. It will come back in the end step. And comes back as a creature. It is no longer impended. So we're going to see cards at the bin. We're going to see cards back to hand. And now a phenomenal board for Oscar. A blocker for the Dinosaur Dragon, same thing. And then a 5/5 in play that demands an answer.
Yeah, Jim, that's what we call a combination.
So we're going to get back a Philia.
The good dog comes back.
And of course, Philia, Flicker Wisp. There's a lot of potential here for a lot of blinking and looping on Oscar's side. So back Ian's way.
If only Yorion was still around, huh? I think we'd add 20 cards to this top deck.
Yeah. That could be a thing that could happen.
Yeah, we'd still be in round 6, though, with how much Yorion slowed down the format.
Exactly. Yeah. So better off the way things are.
Yeah, I'll agree.
All right, so Ian has a lot to work through now. Doesn't really have any clean attacks. The Overlord is a card you must answer. If the Overlord gets to attack, that doesn't feel like it's game over, but it feels like it's a big hill to climb. Yeah,
when you're not playing a combo deck, when you're not going over the top of it, it really does feel like game over. The value that you just get swallowed up from that card, and it just hits for 5. It is a gigantic creature.
All right, so we see Cabo coming down from Ian as well as a Leyline Binding on the Overlord. So deals with the Overlord, but it already got some good value.
Yep. And, that Leyline Binding is not the catch-all, be-all against this deck. If Oscar were to just go land 4 Witch Enchanter or something, this looks, really, really brutal. And even if you just Flicker Wisp or Ephemerate your Flicker Wisp to then blink out the Leyline Binding, get your Overlord back, and then at end step you lose it again, you're still gaining card advantage on that exchange. So still perfectly reasonable from Oscar if he has nothing else to do.
Yeah, this game looks a lot more like what I would expect from this matchup.
Yeah.
That game was obviously super weird. This, much more what I'd think, some creatures from Ian's side, and then the value from Oscar really started to pile up turn after turn.
Yeah, totally agree. Ian, hopes that this game would look a lot like last game, but, not necessarily the case so far. But still a very solid board here from Ian. Oscar will have to deal with this powerful 5/5 which has the ability to do some looting, as well as Clarion Conqueror. Not amazing, but it is shutting down a decent amount of cards.
Yeah, Kava get to work on the graveyard a little bit too, right? So
yeah,
maybe mitigate the Overlord damage a bit, but things are piling up here on Oscar's side in a variety of different ways. Resources in hand, resources in graveyard, and then that kind of, the fear of that binding being temporary too. So going to think it all through.
And Oscar hasn't played a land this turn. More than likely, that's because we don't have one. Could be slow rolling it a little bit. So Oscar has a ton of options here available. Ketramo's coming down, but 0 cards exiled. Okay, a few cards exiled now.
All right, so here is the Ketramos comes down. Feely gets exiled. Solitude coming down. Going to exile the Kavu. We're seeing some draws from Ketramos here. Of course, whenever one or more cards put into exile from your graveyards and or the battlefield, draw a card, lose a life, and it doesn't take many of those activations to start feeling really good about the game.
Yeah, and just being able to Solitude one of your opponent's creatures while you get some value here is excellent. And I think the big, thought process there from Oscar is, okay, which one do I actually hit? The creature that's going to hit me harder, or the Clarion Conqueror that's shutting down a relic that may or may not have actually been in Oscar's hand so far.
Yeah, and
could have drew that one.
If it is the 5/5, for damage-based reasons, Oscar highly valuing staying alive.
Yeah.
All right, so back Ian's way, and again down to this, the single dragon as the offensive force. We see a side of Draco come down, so still no ley line in sight, but Scion's still pretty potent. So Scion's going to give the white creature, what is the ability again? It's not Vigilance?
It is Vigilance, okay. Yep. So Vigilance for white.
So not Lifelink.
Not Lifelink. It feels like it should be Lifelink. I'm with you on that.
All right, so land 5 for Oscar. And just going to pass the turn back. So Clarion Conqueror is doing some work here.
Definitely.
Turning off the relic, turning off the engine, kind of a big deal.
Could still be, maybe a Solitude to just hard cast at any point. Maybe Oscar would consider Solitude, deal with the Clarion Conqueror, then tap the relic to get some card advantage going. But we shall see when the Scion of Draco attacks. That's when we're really going to start finding stuff out.
All right, so Dasher Ragavan getting aggressive. So Ragavan to the red zone, Scion of Draco to the red zone. Reminder, the Ketramos is not currently a creature. There are, I believe, 2 cards in exile. So the only available blocker is Flicker Wisp, which does not have a good block right now.
Yeah, not really. And the buff from Scion of Draco's first strike, which is relevant right now. This Flicker Wisp will not be able to trade with Ragavan as it stands, but something like a Solitude here, and it's a house of cards that starts falling away from Ian, but no! Oh no.
Okay, so we got a hit for 6. Ragavan hits. It's a fatal push. Great card hit for Ragavan, right?
Yes.
That pressure can be immediate revolt. And Oscar's got some spells to cast. Oscar needs to do something here.
Yeah, definitely needs to do something here. Now, you're forced to do the fatal push where you're forced to essentially blink first, as we like to say in the business here, where if there is an ephemerate from Oscar, maybe Oscar can play around it a little bit. But
good catch.
Yeah, that is definitely something I saw as well, that Clarion Conqueror is a universal effect.
Modern day Magic card, a universal effect?
Yeah, right.
It is, yep. Okay, so Ian missed it. I missed it.
I did as well.
All right, so
it's a big deal. I mean, that is huge. Getting to keep Flicker Wisp around or Philia to stay on the battlefield is gigantic. And now Oscar has a couple nice lines available. You can attack, get rid of that Clarion Conqueror, and then Relic to start drawing some cards. Now, you can't do it in such a way where you can get enough cards in the graveyard to then attack with Ketramos as well, unless you do something, proactively to deal with this Clarion Conqueror.
Yeah, a lot to work through here.
Yeah.
A lot of possible blinks. And then if the end step blinks get weird, where it comes back on the end step, and if you blink it at a different time, and so on and so forth. So lots to work through. Oscar going to tap 2 and get an Emperor of Bones going as well. So really getting those engines online.
Yep, absolutely. Also shut off right now. Not able to do anything with that besides exile some cards. But the free exile on Emperor of Bones does trigger Ketramos as well, which we're getting to the life point when you're at 11. Double Shrapnel Blast, Jim.
Yeah. We saw it last game. We did see one go to the bottom for Ian this game. So Ian's got a few cards in hand. So exile Solitude, trigger Ketramos, lose a life, draw a card down to that magic number of 10.
And this is pretty nice. So Fila can attack exile the Conqueror, then you could adapt the Emperor of Bones, get a Solitude into play, exile the Scion, crack the Relic, so you can block with Ketramos. There's a ton of game and a ton of options that Oscar has here.
All right, so goodbye, Dragon. And now all of these cards are free to use their activated abilities once again. 5 damage coming across.
The treasure is online as well here from Ian if there is something available.
That is true.
Maybe a, Stubborn Denial, something like that.
So Ian is thinking about it. Obviously, no blockers available. So thinking about, just going to take damage. Okay. So take 5. And now Oscar's got a lot more available options with the Dragon out of the picture.
Yeah, and now it'll be very interesting how much Oscar wants to respect double Tribal Flames, something along that lines. Or just, regardless, there's going to be 7 damage in the air presented to Oscar next turn. So, that's terrifying even if only one of them connects. If you deal with the Scion and you take 3 from the Clarion Conqueror, not as bad because you're at 6, but while I say that, if you deal with the Scion of Draco with the Solitude, you still lose a life as well, putting you to 5. 5 is a scary number.
Yeah, even 6, combo draws of just Lightning Bolt plus Lightning Bolt or Lightning Bolt plus a Flage. So
yeah.
We saw last game, this sort of surprise combination of burn spells. So Oscar kind of towing the line here a little bit, on the edge of a knife.
Agreed.
Exciting place to be.
But it's, also the same point, I don't think Oscar has the ability to go adapt the Emperor of Bones, Solitude your own Emperor, sack the Solitude. That feels pretty bad too, because these flyers are already going to deal some damage. So killing your opponent's creature is kind of the same as you gaining life at this particular spot in the game.
All right, so tapping 1. Maybe we're looking at just going to pop the Relic. Okay, so Relic goes away. Not wanting to use it twice, just wanting to use it the one time. All the cards go away. Ketramos is now on. We'll see a draw. We'll see life loss.
And you draw cards when the Relic goes, and then the rest of the cards go.
So draw on 2. And Oscar, that felt a little bit desperate.
It really did, because that is a lot of life you're losing. Now, Oscar hasn't played a land, so you do have the ability to... Oh, God. Oh, man, another 2 damage?
The ability to go to 5?
Yeah, the great honor of going to 5?
Yeah, all right. Not happy about it, but
no.
Howl Fountain comes in and shocks, untapped, 3 mana available.
And we know Ian mulliganed this game and put a Tribal Flames on the bottom. I haven't seen his hand since. I'm not sure if there's still one there, but...
All right, so we're going to see consigned to memory on the trigger that would return the Clarion Conqueror.
Spicy.
Very cute use of the Stifle ability there.
So now we consider with the Emperor of Bones when to adapt. If you go to adapt, you can respond to this, right? If we deal with this creature, Solitude would be gone. And all right, now we are definitely going to see, is there a Tribal Flames, because the game is over.
Oh, boy.
Do you think that one was drawn?
I hope so. There is nothing like it.
Okay.
Actually, we had the full 10. So,
yeah.
Wow, what a finish. Ian, Tribal Flames master here. Had 10, only needed 5. What do I have these games to finish?
Wow.